Welcome to the Eastern Echo Sports Podcast, and I'm the host, Eugene Evans, and my partner in crime is Andrew Masharka.
Nice to be here again.
And we have a guest host for the week. He is the managing editor and the former sports editor for the Eastern Echo, Al Wilman.
How's it going? It's good to be a part of your show.
Here's the week in review of Eastern sports. Volleyball lost in 5 sets to Oregon State last Wednesday. Then they traveled down to Valparaiso to play in a tournament. They lost in 5 sets to Valpo, and then they won in 4 sets to Army, and then they lost in 4 sets to Iowa. The soccer team traveled down to Indiana, and they lost 1-0, and then they played Butler and tied 1-1. Then the football team traveled to Happy Valley to play Penn State, and they lost 45-7.
Well. So EMU lost 45-7 against Penn State this past Saturday at University Park, Pennsylvania, at Beaver Stadium. There were some positives that you could take out of that game. Specifically, sophomore linebacker Matt Hunt. Hunter Matt. Thank you very much for that. We will keep that in there. Hunter Matt had the fumble off of Christian Hackenberg. Christian Hackenberg tried to throw the ball, but it slipped out of his hand. Hunter Matt saw it and got it at the 11-yard line, scooped it up, and scored for the first touchdown of the game to put the Eagles up 7-0. And that was essentially their only touchdown of the game because there was no offensive touchdowns from that point forward. There was it wasn't 2 blocked field goals. There was a blocked field goal, and there was a botched field goal attempt, which was a bad snap, and Mark Ionati, who was the backup quarterback and also holder, just was not able to get the ball into the position in the nick of time, so everything just went to high hell, essentially. So, what do you take away from Hunter Matt's touchdown now?
Well, I mean, at that point in the game, they're kind of fighting for 3 and outs. EMU had kind of, at that point, the previous drive on offense, they were doing a real good job of marching up the field. Tyler Benz was really taking that team and just marching them. Unfortunately, they couldn't really get anywhere, in the red zone or anything like that. But I saw strokes of brilliance in that offense. The play calling at that point was good in my opinion. Could have been better, but it was good. And then on defense, there was just all heart. They're putting it all out on the line there against a Big Ten school, a bigger school that in a lot of circles you would say wouldn't expect Eastern to be as competitive as they were in that first quarter. Like a lot of things about that team. You can call them a lot of things, but devoted and full of heart is not one of them that you can't say that they're not. They're a real hard playing team, and they put out on the line every day. So there's that to go for too. And on that botch snap, I was sitting in the third row of on the EMU sideline, so I had a pretty good view of it from my perspective. And going back, rewinding a week to the Howard game, the freshman long snapper, whose name I can't recall, he missed the snap on a punt. Sent it high over the punter's head, and the punter took it with one hand and got a decent punt off. So I think that special teams have been bailing this guy out, but he's a freshman. He'll come into it a little while. Big stage in Happy Valley, real loud crowd too. So it would have jarred just about anybody, I think. But yeah, overall, my take of the game moving forward onto Rutgers next week is that it's going to be hopefully, in which I've heard a lot of coaches over the years say, that these big games are kind of a tune-up in respect to kind of get the bugs out, to get the nerves kind of settled down, so that when conference play starts up, you're just you're ready to go. You're hopefully by that point firing on all cylinders. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, so good analysis of the game. Some other things to take away from the 45-7 game. You mentioned Tyler Benz earlier about how he had a good performance. I saw it from a different perspective. I believe it was essentially more of a game managing situation because he only went 17 of 26 passing and only threw for 115 yards, with his longest throw of the game being an 18-yard completion to tight end Tyrese Russell, who, by the way, also had an outstanding game. All career highs with 8 catches and 73 yards.
Yep.
And just essentially it was just very conservative play calling from Stan Parrish. And I think if they want to win some games this season, they're going to have to start taking chances with Tyler Benz, or else we're going to have to start seeing more of the freshman phenom quarterback, Brogan Roback. And we did see some of him in the fourth quarter. And from my analysis of the one drive he was in, he clearly has the better arm of the two. He shows more of the athletic ability of the two, especially with his rollout.
I agree. And you mentioned, too, a great point with Tyler Benz and the offensive play calling not taking shots downfield. There were 2 passes that I saw in the 20 yards plus category of throwing. The first one was poorly placed. It was, were it not for the missing even the defender, it would have been an interception, I think. And what you mentioned about Brogan Roback, 4-star quarterback, brother of a volleyball player, Paige Roback, he's got a cannon for an arm. That kid, a couple good passes I saw in his drive late in the fourth quarter were actual laser beams. So if you want to do a change of pace type thing, if you want to really incorporate him into that game plan to kind of get upfield, move the ball real quick, he's an, I think, ideal candidate for that type of situation.
Yep. And another thing to take away from the game, I've been getting this on my Twitter handle for like the last week, and I've had people comment to me, why haven't you included the special teams in there? Why did you include the punter, Austin Barnes? Well, now's the time, and this is not a good time if I have to explain what the punter did, because he had 11 punts on the day, and he had a total of 461 yards punting, and he averaged 41.9 yards per punt attempt, as long as punt was 52 yards. But again, as I said, it's never a good sign when I have to mention a punter in any game story going for 11 attempts in any game. That means chances are the offense was not moving down the field,
That's right.
and there were many 3-and-out drives. So that's got to change. Like, no offense to Barnes, I think he does have a good leg.
He had a phenomenal kicking game.
Yeah, but
And he's a great athlete too. Like I mentioned in that Howard game where he had a bad snap and he caught it with one hand and still got a good punt off. I mean, that guy, he's gonna do some good things, but I don't know if you want to see your punter have to do good things game in and game out. I mean, sure, situationally, you wouldn't mind seeing him put one in the corner, pinning the guys inside the 10 or something like that. But to see 11 punts,
Yeah, you shouldn't see him 11 times. That's
that's
too
not.
much.
And if you conversely look at Penn State, their punter Butterworth, 5 punts, 207 yards, and as long as 51. So when you're over double what the other guys are doing, that's a scary, scary statistic.
Yeah.
also, another thing that didn't make things any better was the loss of linebacker Sean Kurtz in the third quarter. He suffered some kind of injury. We didn't know what it was. We didn't get any word after the game. We still don't know, as of right now, what his status is for next week's game against Rutgers. But I believe the injury, and it was about, they were still in the game. It was about 24-7. So it wasn't like it was out of range, but it appeared after that injury occurred, the wind was taken out of their sails, and they just ran out of energy when we got to the fourth quarter. And Hackenberg's arm, the legs of Bill Belton, the running back, and the speed of the wide receiver, Allen Robinson, just took full sail, and the game was over with at that point. It was essentially good night and go to sleep.
Well, anytime you have an injury, especially on a unit that at that point was clicking pretty well, playing with a good intensity, that's going to take the wind out of your sails. That's going to have an effect, regardless of if it's a key player or if it's some guy that came off the bench for 5 minutes. Any injury to a team that has the potential to turn the corner like that at the position of the game that they were when he got hurt is going to have a detrimental effect to you. And the same thing could happen on offense. Some guy in offense gets hurt, it's a left tackle, but it doesn't matter.
Right.
It's you see your buddy get hurt, that's gonna it's gonna affect you.
Also of note, from the Penn State side, Christian Hackenberg, who's a freshman, set the all-time quarterback record for freshmen at Penn State with 311 yards in one game to go along with 23 of 33 passing. And also he did have a touchdown pass and an interception. And he was very shaky from the start, but did pick things up.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see it the same way
I did,
when you were at the game, Al?
I did. And for him, the way I was seeing it is the home opener for a true freshman. So you're going to have a little bit of butterflies in your stomach going into a crowd like Happy Valley, like I mentioned. and go out there and try to to prove yourself in one game, And I think that as a 5-star recruit as Hackenberg is, there's obviously that raw talent already in place. But once you saw his nerves kind of calm down, he was placing passes well. He was making good judgment in terms of the shots he was taking. He wasn't throwing to open guys, or he was throwing to open guys. He threw a couple of good checkdowns too late in the second quarter. But the stat too that got me going back to this again is his long pass was 45 yards. So he was taking shots downfield effectively. Where Tyler Benz's long was 18 yards. That was the furthest pass he threw. And he got and Hackenberg was sacked 4 times. So EMU's defense was getting to him. They were getting to the quarterback, putting pressure on him. But the big difference is the guy's composure. He calmed down. He changed when he needed to, and the score kind of shows the result. You saw what happened after that.
Unfortunately, another thing that got exposed in that game is the fact that it appears again it's the same story. The Eagles appear to be a one-dimensional team on offense. It's clearly built on their running game, and thus far in the first 2 games, we have yet to see any receivers break out for any meaningful performances. You agree with that?
I do. I noticed, especially later in the game, and maybe when Stan Parrish and Ron Lewis thought maybe the game was out of reach. I'm not sure. I'm not those guys. I can't speak for them, but they were on a couple of third down plays that had the potential maybe to exploit some big yardage. When Penn State's defense was kind of moving in, expecting to run, and they gave it to them. Now you see those guys moving in. I mean, anybody would have suggested, Monday morning quarterback, fine, and say, hey, okay, you see your guys moving in, move a guy up to the seam and just throw the ball to him. But even on the ground, you mentioned a one-dimensional process. The Eagles only gained 99 yards all day, and 40 of them came from Bronson Hill. So obviously something's not working. And true, it's a bigger team, and Penn State does have a really good defense, especially against the run. But something's got to give. You've got guys like Ryan Brumfield and Javonte Green who kind of proved themselves before, but obviously Hill overshadowed them last year. And then Darius Jackson, who had a decent game against Howard, he had a touchdown, and then 8 rushes for 19 yards on Saturday against Penn State. But you've got, when your tight end is your leading receiver, if you can take the running game out of the equation for a second, you've got guys like Donald Scott and Demarius Reed who can get downfield, who are fast. And Scott, is getting better in terms of not catching the ball before he runs with it. So his hands are better, I think, this year from what I've seen so far. You got to trust those guys. They're on your team for a reason. You got to use the weapons that you have.
Yeah, and also to piggyback off your point with tight ends dominating, the second leading receiver was another tight end, DeJuan Alford. He had 3 receptions for 16 yards. So it wasn't even like the second best receiver was a real receiver, it was another tight end. So, things have to pick up. Something's got to change here, or else it's going to be a potentially having another 10-loss season and more than likely the end of Ron English's reign as head coach.
Well, we'll see what happens. I mean, we've got Rutgers coming up next week, and they're coming off a shootout against Fresno State where
they lost.
Yeah, they end up losing 52-51.
Yep.
And in that game, let me see, there was one stat that I was looking at earlier that kind of got my attention. 5 of the each team's touchdowns came in the air. So they're taking shots downfield. Against Fresno State in the opener, the long pass for Gary Nova, the Rutgers quarterback, was 69 yards.
Yeah. So
he was shooting the ball downfield. In the second game against Norfolk State, 38-0 shutout for Rutgers victory. He only threw for 150 yards. So Norfolk State was able to, kind of slow down the pass a little bit, it looked like, at least on paper. But at the same time, the Rutgers defense was able to shut out Norfolk State. So something's got to give soon. Yes, it's a bigger team. It's a BCS school, which all time right now Eastern is winless against in 48 matches. So you go in there, you make a good showing. that could change the composure of your whole season.
Yeah.
So, go out there, get the ball in the air, throw your threats downfield, and see what the game gives you.
Exactly. So, and you mentioned the 0 for 48 all time against BCS schools. You would think, even for a school as Eastern as a mid-major, you would have thought at some point maybe they could have stole a game from a major school, somehow, somewhere. Heck, you had Toledo recently. 2008?
Mm-hmm.
They came into the big house and embarrassed Michigan. It wasn't even like that game was close. They dominated from start to finish. And Toledo's not a major team in the MAC. They're a middle-of-the-road team.
Mm-hmm.
They've had success in the past, but, and you've had, like, schools like Appalachian State come there and beat Michigan. Heck, last year, little-known Louisiana Monroe win Arkansas, beat them. Mm-hmm. So it's very discouraging that Eastern's gone their whole history about being a major team. And I had somebody come up to me and was like, well, didn't the UConn game in 2000 count? No, it doesn't technically, because at that time, UConn was not even a D1 team, I believe. They were still fighting to gain their independence to move up to D1. They were still D2. So that does not count as a major conference win. So hopefully the Rutgers game can change things, but again, if they don't develop another dimension in their offense, it's going to be very unlikely that we see a lot of points again from the Eagles' offense.
And I'll give you an even more recent example of an FCS team coming in and almost embarrassing, I would say, a MAC team. This past Saturday, Noco State went into Kalamazoo and won 27-23 against Western, a team that outgained them, in total yards, and they still came in there and they made it count. So, I mean, you have to understand that the talent level all around college football, in my opinion, is getting better. In gains in recruiting, in coaching, and play calling, all throughout, all these things combined are making, I think, better FCS teams. Yeah. And so, I mean, yes, it's trickling up effect. Everybody's getting better, but you have to get better. You have to go out there and, even though it's, you're the underdog, quote unquote, or you're the guy that there's a school that's getting paid some amount of money to go and play these bigger schools. You got to go in and you got to play for 4 quarters. Yeah. You can't just get down, 3 touchdowns and start running the ball. Go in there, play to win. The Herm Edwards, you play to win the game. You have to do that here.
Yeah, indeed. Play to win the game. So, wish I had a soundbite for that. Oh, that would be so awesome to throw on this podcast. But I digress on that. But yeah, and even in EMU's case, they're scheduled down the line. It's not getting any better, and it's clear. I'll just flat out say it. It's all for the money at this point, because there's no other reason why you would continuously schedule teams like next year. They go to Florida September 6th in 2014, and then they go to Michigan State September 27th in 2014. Heck, even down the line in 2015, they're going to LSU. So it's good to get the exposure for recruiting, sort of, but it's not making it any better, because those are almost guaranteed losses at this point. And until they can beat a big school, it's going to continue to be that way. So hopefully they can prove me wrong on Saturday, because that'd be the perfect antidote. That'd be the perfect medicine. That'd cure everything if they could just beat Rutgers. It will shut me up. But until then, it's going to continue to be, they play a big school, they're going to lose.
Well, I mean, even moving forward, the schedule the next 3 weeks, you're at home against Ball State on the 21st, and then you go back out to New York for 2 more games. You got Buffalo and Army. Yeah. So you have to win games on the road. Yeah. That is going to be crucial. So, when 1, 2, 3, 4 of your first 6 games are on the road, you have to do something away from home. And it's not going to get any easier, like you mentioned, Eugene. Whether it be against Buffalo, whether it be against Ball State, or go down, to Western Michigan at home in November, Bowling Green in November. You have to win the games early, because that's going to set the pace for your whole season.
Yep. Because if they don't be careful and they go on a losing streak early, especially with the pressure under Coach Ron English, he could easily lose his team, and then they could quit and just not be motivated, and they'll be like, bring in the next head coach. I don't care at this point.
Well, I'll stop you there on that point, and I'm not going to say that the team's going to give up on their head coach. I mean, I've seen these guys play. They're not the giving up team. Yeah. It's not in their blood. They don't do that. So to say that they're going to give up, I don't think that's going to happen. But you're right. There is pressure on the coach English to go out there and put wins on the board, especially given 10 wins in 4 years. That's including a winless season in the mix. So there's a lot of pressure there. New AD, who has already made moves in some smaller sports to get some other coaches in play. So I think that the buck stops here. So you win games. I think that's an easy schedule. I wouldn't say easy schedule, but most of these games, if not all of them, are in any level winnable. You've got Western at home. I think that's a winnable game.
Who they did defeat last year.
Yes.
Who probably were the team that was most responsible for costing Bill Cubitt his job.
Yeah, I mean, you lose a game against a rival school, and you're having a kind of iffy season already. That's going to be a deal breaker, I think. But you got, moving up, earlier on the schedule, you got Ohio at home. That could go either way. I think Army on the road. That could go either way. Northern Illinois with a new coach. That could go either way. I mean, any of these games, if you look on paper, they can go either way. The key, I think, is to go out there, dominate early, like you mentioned before, and just hold on to a lead. And that's something that, I mean, especially now, in the MAC, you look at Western Michigan. They couldn't get, they couldn't lose the lead. You get the lead back against Nicholls State, like I mentioned before. Yet Central, that comes in every year, and they're on right now a new quarterback. I think they got an injury to their starter, and I think they got a new running back that's playing too.
Mm-hmm.
And they had some pretty good numbers last week. So if you look at any of these teams, just have to come in there, get the lead early, and then I think, and here's my crazy prediction of the year, shy of a bowl game, really.
No.
I don't see Ron English coming back as head coach next year.
Yeah, I think it's the consensus, not just with us, but with probably most students and most fans of the team, that if they don't get to a bowl game, it's hard to justify him getting another contract.
And it's difficult going from winning a couple 3 games every year. You had a good 6-6 season a couple years ago. So to have to right the ship in 1 year for any coach is a challenge. So I'm interested to see, like I said, the play calling earlier going on to Penn State. If they can hold on to that mentality, onto the, just get up the field and then let your defense stop them. If that holds true, moving forward, I think EMU might come out with a 7-win season. They'll be bowl eligible at that point. So if they can put 7 wins on the board playing that style of football, they'll be okay.
Yep. So we'll see what they do this Saturday against Rutgers. Hopefully it'll be an Eagles win, but we'll see what happens. And if you want to watch the game, you can watch the game online on ESPN3 and the Watch ESPN app. Or if you want to listen to it on radio, you can listen to it on WEMU 89.1 FM.
And also at the Eastern Echo on Twitter, we'll be having some live tweets from the game, so be sure to check us out.
This past weekend, Al Willman, as I mentioned earlier, the managing editor for the Echo, made the long journey from Ypsilanti, Michigan out to University Park, Pennsylvania for the Penn State game. And he's now here to tell you his great road trip experience.
Thanks, Eugene. Well, I drove out there. I didn't really drive. I was sitting in the back seat most of the time. But with my roommate and a couple of friends of ours, and we drove out. We left at 3:30 in the morning on first thing Friday morning, so we were all a little bit tired. But drove out for about 6.5 hours to get out to University Park. And it's a great town. It's kind of a diamond in the rough, if you will. There's a lot of small town USA once you get around there, but then it seems like you get about 5 minutes away from campus and it turns into a small town, like civilization looking. So, I mean, that was nice, a good part of it. But I think that the biggest thing I'm taking away from that trip is getting to the stadium and getting around the tailgate atmosphere, and just how open and welcoming all the people were at Penn State, because we were wearing some green and white. So they kind of figured out that we were, to see Eastern, and it's it's not like a lot of places you go where we're the bigger, better team and we're gonna kill you. It's something like that. It's like, oh hey, thanks for making the trip to come out, or it's nice to see you here. Come support your school or whatever. And we actually ran into a former EMU running back who played in the '80s, whose name I forget, but he played out in the '80s, and it's like, well, thank you. You got we were the 4 of us were wearing our green and white going into the stadium. He's like, he stopped us. He's like, you guys are motivating me to put my jersey on. So like he had a shirt or jersey, something like that.
Yeah.
So that was pretty cool. And then just being inside the stadium, surrounded, where we're sitting, surrounded by Penn State, supporters, and just how they have it's regular conversation. It seems like it's like how far did you come from? The generic stuff, but then it's like you guys are playing pretty well. We're in that first quarter when things were kind of going well. It's like, you guys are playing really well. It's you guys might win some few games if you keep playing like this. It's like, well, okay. I figured, you guys are playing well, but don't worry, we're a better team. We'll come back and get you. And that never, that was never said.
Right.
And so we're leaving after the 45-7, shellacking, and just again, thanks for coming. It was nice to see you. Had a safe trip back, stuff like that, and for different people all around. About a dozen different people that I talked to, or who, like I said, because we were in the green and white, that came and sought us out. And just I think the Penn State, if anybody out there is listening to this, you should be proud of your guys as fans. They're a really classy bunch, and I think they're matched very few places in the nation. So,
Interesting thing I would like to ask. Was there any resentment for the Joe Pod thing? Was that noticed at all when you were in
that never really came up. Honestly, they did honor the 1973 team. Last one that went undefeated, I believe, was how that went, and they ended up retiring one of the jerseys of their Heisman winning running back that year. And so there's a picture of Joe Pa on the big screen at one point during the presentation, and they really, there was still a lot of support for Joe Pa. A lot of people were on their feet, kind of, clapping for him and stuff. So I think, everybody knows about that scandal by now. But I don't think a lot of the people in Penn State, from what I observed, really hold that against Paterno himself.
Okay. That's fair. Well, thanks for sharing your story, your road trip to University Park, Pennsylvania.
Hey, no problem.
And maybe if you make some more road trips during the season, you can come back and tell us how that went.
Sounds good. Well, I won't be at Rutgers, I'll tell you that. That's a little far from me right now. Yeah. But I do plan on probably being in attendance at the Toledo game, going to Central. Not sure about going to Northern Illinois, probably not, but the close ones,
Okay,
so.
That's fair. Well, again, thank you for sharing your experience.
No problem, thank you.
Here is the upcoming Eastern Michigan Athletics schedule for the week. On Tuesday, women's volleyball plays Oakland at 7 p.m. at the Convocation Center. Then on Friday, women's and men's cross country has a meet in Bowling Green. Women's volleyball has 3 games in Providence, Rhode Island against Bryant, Holy Cross, and Brown. Then, as mentioned before, Eastern Michigan football plays at Rutgers at 1 p.m. And the game will be televised on ESPN3, and you can listen to the audio on WVMU 89.1. Then women's golf plays all weekend in East Lansing. And then finally, women's soccer plays against Michigan State at home at 1 p.m. Sunday.
That is all for this week's Eastern Echo Sports Podcast. Follow the Eastern Echo on Twitter at The Eastern Echo. Follow Eugene Evans on Twitter at Eastern Echo Gino. That is at Eastern Echo Gino.
And you can follow me, Andrew Masharka, at A Masharka.
And you can follow Al Willman on Twitter at Al Willman Echo. Thanks for coming in today for this podcast, and we'll see you next week, and we will have a special one-on-one interview as I sit down with the new athletic director of EMU Athletics, Heather Like.